Hi, I'm James, and in this video we are taking a look at a Dell XPS 15 9530 laptop, and this was suffering from an expanded and potentially dangerous battery, and also had been dropped at some point, which had damaged the DC jack and also the plastic in the base surrounding it. So we are going to be replacing the battery, which I actually have already done, but was recording this just to demonstrate, and also replace that DC jack and fit a refurbished base. So the first thing we need to do is we're using a Torx T5 screwdriver to remove the 10 screws from the base of the laptop. And once these are done, with just a few remaining, you'll find that actually there is one missing from this machine. Must have come loose at some point. Because the other 9 are there, we are not going to worry about that too much. And so with those removed, our next thing to do is to swap to a Philips 00 screwdriver bit and lift the little panel here in the center of the laptop. This has 2 Phillips screws in it, which we are going to then undo and remove. Well, actually they stay in place. They can be removed, but not essential. I think one came out, the other one did not want to lift up here. So with that done, we're going to close the little cover. And then we're going to take our pry tool. This system has been opened up before. It was featured around 7 years ago on this channel when I looked at how to do an SSD upgrade, and is now in just for a repair. So we pry at the front here, and that allows us to just loosen the base. Doesn't take a great deal to get this off, as it's held on mostly by the screws. But lifting that and putting it out the way, we get access to the laptop. Our next job is to disconnect the battery. Always a good move before working on any laptop. Now here I'm just pushing on the lip at the bottom of the connector with the pry tool. Now actually an easier way of doing this can be to just remove the battery first and then gently pull on the cable. But in this instance I did it the other way around. Having freed that, we are then going to return to our Phillips head screwdriver and undo the 4 screws holding the battery in place. This is a type T0TRM battery. This is the 61 watt hour option for this laptop. If you have a version of the machine which doesn't have a 2.5 inch SATA hard drive, and instead just has a SSD storage option, then you may well have the wider 90 watt hour battery, in which case there will be some additional screws to remove, but the general process is basically the same. So with those screws removed, we just simply have to then lift the battery out of place. And now we can turn our attention to the DC jack. So to gain access to this part, our first job is to remove the 3 screws which hold in the hinge. It sometimes is possible to sort of wiggle things clear with the hinge still in place, but it does make particularly refitting quite difficult depending on the exact positioning of the sort of thicker part of the DC connector. So what we're going to do is get that hinge lifted, but before we do that we are going to just disconnect this touch connector for the screen. So slide that gently out. And move to one side. And then we are able to get our pry tool in underneath the hinge. It takes quite a bit of force to lift this as it was quite stiff, so got the pry tool in and then just use my hand to help pull it up. And with that done, we can then remove the screw that holds in the DC jack. On this point, it was actually already cracked and broken, so we can see here that it is not fixed to that mounting bracket. So we can just disconnect the cable by sliding it out of the socket, and then we're just going to remove that residual piece like so. With that done, we can then take our replacement part and press it into place and screw down the bracket. We can then maneuver around the cable and plug it into the connector. Like so. Having done this, we can then push down and close up the hinge and then screw in the 3 screws. On this DC jack, and partly the reason why I had to open the hinge, the thicker part of the connector was slightly closer to the jack itself. It was the same part number, so in theory should have been the same as the original, but closing the hinge onto it did not pose any issues. It worked just fine having done that. So with 3 screws replaced, our final job in this corner is to reconnect our touch connector. So just repositioning the cable slightly and slotting the touch connector back into its socket. This is quite small and a bit fiddly, but that can be done, and then just press the tape back into place. Next, we want to refit our battery. We are doing this by starting by plugging in the connector and then positioning the battery into place before refitting the 4 screws that hold it into the laptop. With the battery refitted, we can then turn our attention to that refurbished base panel. And starting with that panel, what we want to do is to remove the original service tag to make sure that we can reattach the one from our old panel. So this service tag is very useful if you need to find the specifications of the system. So we're just going to use the pry tool here to remove the original. Now that one was not relevant to the system we have, so we are just cleaning that up, getting our original base panel. Now this service tag we want to be a bit more careful with, as this is one we are transferring across. So again, we are just going to carefully begin lifting it with the end of the pry tool. And once the end is up there, just very carefully and slowly peel it out. With that done, we can then go back to the refurbished base and fit the system's correct service tag. This is useful as obviously in future, if we need to see the specs of the machine, it will give us the specs of our system and not someone else's old scrapped one. Finally, all that's left to do is to refit the base, returning the 2 screws into the base panel in the centre and then the 10 Torx 5 screws around the edges. I hope you found this video helpful. If it's helped you fix your laptop, give us a like. Let us know in the comments below if it's been helpful or you've got any questions or comments, and hit subscribe if you'd like to see more videos as we post them. Thanks for watching.